Hello, welcome back to my video blog. This video is in response to a question that was posted in relation to my introduction to pre and perinatal psychotherapy and psychology. And very interesting question. This is the kind of question that gets me excited about answering questions. It was posted by Howard Davis. So first of all, thank you, Howard, for your question. And I'm just going to turn here and read it to you. He says he has a question with regard to bodily held traumatic memory. If memory exists at a cellular level, how far do you go when you work with clients, given the probability of there being multifaceted, interlinking layers of directly and indirectly held experiences in each of us? I have a felt sense that traumatic experience has potentially deep, deep roots that can take us beyond the prenatal and perinatal. And yes, I really agree with that, both from my intuitive sense, my own work on myself, and from working with clients for many years in this territory. So just to say that, first of all, the very first psychotherapy that I did was actually past life regression work. And I really didn't know what to think about that at the time. I wasn't sure if past lives really existed, although it felt like they did to me. And as I did the work, which was hypnotic regression primarily, I felt like I was there, and it convinced me at the time. What was more important, however, was that it had a profound effect on my life and how I was able to be with myself and be with others in my life. And quite a few things about my way of being and even my personality shifted. I didn't necessarily conclude from that it was about past lives. I mean, who knows? In a way, do we even know that anything beyond this moment exists? That might be a question for another video, but I think even science is looking at that right now. The whole field of quantum physics. What actually is reality, and is it the way we've imagined it or believed it to be? What was clear to me, however, at least at some point, was that looking at past lives was a useful metaphor. And I looked at prenatal and birth therapy when I was learning it and really engaged in it for myself as a similar thing. It clearly has a profound healing effect to look at our lives from that very early time in our lives. Now, what does all that mean? Well, I could probably talk for hours about that, and maybe I'll do some other videos after this as well that will continue the discussion. What's interesting to me to start with is the idea of cellular memory and how far that could go. I do have a sense that as we're coming into this life, that whatever is important for us in this life, if we have past life experiences or parallel life experiences, that whatever it is, that is somehow being enfolded into our being and our bodies as we are forming. I don't know exactly how that happens. I don't even know exactly what that means, to be honest. I don't know that any of us do. What seems to be happening is that cellular memory is at work. Now, we know that cells have memory. That's really not in question any longer. For example, if we look at the immune system, it cannot function without cellular memory. Cells remember what they've encountered before, and they act based on that memory. And that can protect us on a cellular physiological level. That's cellular memory. There are other aspects of cellular memory where we seem to remember experiences from before we had a brain, before our nervous system was functioning, uh, before we had language, certainly. And people in the field of pre and perinatal psychology talk about cellular memory as being responsible for that. So the question may be, how can cells gather information and remember it? One of the things we understand about cells is that they're filled with fluid, protoplasm, and that fluid, water is a highly resonant element. Our cells learn and experience, at least in part, through resonance. They communicate through resonance. Cells within the body need to be able to communicate with each other in order for us to have coherence and health. What happens to a cell before birth? Or let's make it even juicier in a way, before conception. So the egg that I was before conception, before I was conceived, was inside my mother, in her ovary. That egg was formed when she was still a fetus inside her mother, my grandmother. Now, if cells are communicating and gathering information through resonance, that means that the egg that developed into all the cells of my body was learning, if you will, was receiving information directly from my mother's cells and directly from her mother's cells when she was still inside her mother. So that's very interesting. There is a direct link to ancestral experience on that level. I wasn't completely separate from my mother or my grandmother. On a cellular level, there was a direct communication. And in some way, that's remembered within my body. It's interesting, though, to look at what might be happening in terms of memory beyond even that. It seems that we have ancestral memory from beyond our grandparents. It seems that we also have understanding, compassion, empathy for other kinds of beings, other animals. If you believe in aliens, I'm not sure if I do or not, but when you see movies, programs about human interactions with aliens, you see the possibility expressed for empathy with them. We seem to have some understanding for how the cosmos works, the mystery. There's a resonance within our systems with that. What does that mean? How is that possible? If our cells are learning and receiving information through resonance, it's not just with my mother or my grandmother or even my father or grandfather. There's a resonance with all other fluid. That's one of the things I've learned from Continuum Movement and Emily Conrad, who founded it. She understood through her inquiry into our fluid nature that there's a continuum, a continuity, a resonance between all forms of fluid. Our cells that form us as an embryo and continue to live within us throughout our lives, the planet, the cosmos. She saw them all as being one stream, one fluid stream, one resonant stream. That takes us way beyond the pre and perinatal. Now, if we're looking at trauma, what happens in trauma on a cellular level can be multifold, and perhaps I'll talk about that in more detail in another video. But we know that our tissues can contract with trauma. There can be a freezing. Certainly their nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, the fight-flight nervous system, and the parasympathetic nervous system that's involved with a freeze or a dissociation response. That physiology is happening on a cellular level. Our cells can remember that experience. Now, let's say some distant relative was involved in war. Is it possible that my cells, or perhaps my cells as an embryo or as an egg or sperm, that they resonate with that distant relative's experience? And it may have been expressed through to my parents, for example, and so I pick that up on a cellular level. But it may have been communicated in other ways as well. We live within fields. We are field phenomena. Our cells resonate through vibrational frequencies. If there is a war that has influenced the culture that I grow up in, even if the war isn't happening now, I'm going to be influenced by that in some way. And what seems to be true is that there's a physiological and a cellular effect there. So what I find is when I'm working with people on pre and perinatal material, and often people come to me with that intention because they know that's my thing, that's a major area of my expertise. I don't assume that everything that's arising is from their prenatal and birth experience. I actually don't, I try not to assume anything. My intention in being with someone in therapy is to support them in being able to be present with whatever their experience is, whatever arises, and whatever has arisen for them in the past that they may still be resonating with. So if there's trauma, whether it's in their personal past, say from birth, or whether it's some kind of resonance in their cells with somebody else's trauma, one of their ancestors, or a trauma at a societal level, within the culture, the physiology can be the same. The reaction can be the same. And the healing can also be the same. It's about bringing presence to that. Usually it's about slowing down the reaction so that it's possible to be present with it, and something else can happen. A different kind of response becomes possible. It becomes possible to access our original creativity and potential. I'll be speaking much more about that in future videos. But just to say for now, in response to this question, that when I work with people, I do tend to trust that what arises is what needs to be addressed. And I may or may not understand exactly what the story or the metaphor is that comes with what arises. It may be important for somebody to hold their experience within a certain context. That's how they've identified it. It may be how they identify themselves. So let's say somebody sees themselves as having been abused very early in life, for example. There have been incidences of people who feel that they've been abused, actually resonating with, say, their abuse that occurred to the mother, or vice versa. They might see it as having occurred to someone else, but it actually occurred to them. There can be confusion about what happened in a traumatic experience, but there continues to be a resonance within the system with that experience, and that can be limiting. What I see as important in therapy is not necessarily to go, oh, well, that's from this time. We don't necessarily know that. Sometimes it's helpful to have a metaphor to work with, but I hold it loosely. If somebody is, for example, presenting very typical implantation trauma, so the time when we implant in the uterine wall of the mother, we tend to experience that memory in the cells of the forehead for whatever mysterious reason. I've heard that those cells were actually, the cells in the forehead are actually derived from the cells that originally made contact with the uterine wall, but I haven't actually been able to see that in my studies of embryology so far. So I'm not sure about that. It seems to me that actually all of our cells should and could hold a memory like that. But if I see somebody doing this, for example, or they demonstrate the kinds of issues that people who had difficulty with implantation demonstrate, like not feeling welcome or feeling like there's nowhere for them to land, to ground, or to be in their lives. They have difficulty finding a home, things like that. And there could be many other things. I may hold that within, I want to say, within the context of the metaphor of implantation. And there may be many other resonances with that from other times in their history, from other people's history, and perhaps from their history from other lifetimes, if that, I don't know if that's real, but it's a metaphor. And I'm going to support that person in being able to settle with whatever metaphor is speaking to them, what they express, what they bring forward. I'm going to hold that, their experience that they present, within as large a context as I can, so that as much potential for healing is available as possible. The wider our perception, the more we are capable of orienting to the health that's present, that's always present. And so, in answer to this wonderful question, is it possible to even know the answer? I'm not sure, but I find it really intriguing. What do our cells resonate with in terms of history? What do we resonate with in terms of history? And that may be useful to look at both the trauma history and the more supportive history that's available. Sometimes it's useful to resonate with potential support from other times, even other people. So there's a bit to chew on. And as always, I really look forward to your comments and responses and questions. I'd love to hear your questions or read your questions, which will inspire future videos. I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.